Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, good morning, good
Good morning,
morning.
everybody.
I actually couldn't do this thing in my background.
Okay. I, because you can change it through, virtual background setting in the settings.
Okay.
So, but let it be right now because now
Okay.
we're going to be.
Okay.
It might take some time.
Good morning, Tribo. I'm Sari. Yeah.
Good morning, sir. Professor Sari Hanafi. Warm welcome to you. Nice to see you here connected.
Pleasure.
Shall we
So
start?
I noticed that I have 3 minutes only to present the journal. So I will talk a little bit about it and maybe show the table of content. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Pathak sir, Professor Pathak sir has also joined us.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
so nice.
sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tribu. I'm here.
Good morning, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Morning.
Don't come this side.
Uh, shall we start it, ma'am? I think it is 11:03, so
Yes. Am I audible to all?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. We start with the proceedings. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Team RSA welcomes you all to the Rajasthan Sociological Association's 27th International Annual Conference 2020 on Education and Society, Equity, Justice and Inclusion, Reassessing Emancipation and Subordination. It's a matter of great pride and honor for all of us to have amongst us the benign presence of Professor Sari Hanafi, President, International Sociological Association, Professor Paramjit Singh, Judge, President, Indian Sociological Society, Professor Avijit Pathak, eminent sociologist, Center for the Study of Social Systems, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Professor S.C. Rajora, President, Rajasthan Sociological Association. RSA takes pride in hosting its first virtual conference with 4 technical sessions spread over 4 days from 7th to 10th February with about 150 participants and 50 paper presentations. This virtual platform is very symbolic and reflective of the extraordinary times that we are all living in. The pandemic has altered the world in ways which none had imagined a year ago. Such virtual platforms, till now the forte of corporate world, have become the hallmark in the field of education. The next 4 days are dedicated to deliberations related to changes in the field of education and their impact on the social pattern. I'm sure the participants are going to deliberate and have enlightening discussions and meaningful debates on how education, its techniques, institutional setups, etc., are shaped by the social world. At the same time, it would be interesting to know how education is performing as an agent of change, whether we are moving in the desired direction or just consolidating on existing inequalities. I'm sure the coming 4 days, would keep you all glued to your screens and create a meaningful learning environment. Beginning with the program, I would like to invite Professor S.C. Rajora, who in his capacity as president of RSA has always been extremely supportive in lending his experience and position to expand the vistas of knowledge and to popularize sociology as a subject both among the teacher and the taught. I invite you, sir, for the welcome address.
Thank you so much. Namaskar to one and all. It is my privilege to welcome you on the occasion of 27th Annual Conference organized by Rajasthan Sociological Association. Obviously, Rajasthan Sociological Association is a regional association with a major chunk of like members from Rajasthan state, but due to our inclusive approach, we have a good number of members from other states of our country, as well as from abroad too. This is an expansion of regional to universal. Therefore, our annual conferences have been taking a shape of international conference. At the outset, I heartily welcome to the chief guest, Professor Sari Hanafi, President, International Sociological Association, who has accepted our request to grace the occasion and join us. Sir, salam.
Salam. Salam.
Thank
Assalamu
you.
alaikum.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Being a regional association, we need encouragements from the mentor body, the Indian Sociological Society. I also warmly welcome Professor Paramjit Singh Judge, who is the president of Indian Sociological Society, and he is chairing the inaugural session of the conference. Sat Sri Akal to Judge Sahib. I extend wholehearted welcome to Professor Avijit Pathak, an eminent sociologist from CSS Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, who has been kind enough to present today's keynote address, and fourth, Professor I.P. Modi, Oration. Sir, बहुत बहुत नमस्कार आपको.
Namaskar, namaskar.
Welcome to the panelists and experts, chairpersons, co-chairpersons, and session coordinators. Heartily welcome and congratulations to Professor Shiv Prasad Gupta from Jodhpur and Dr. Mridula Trivedi from Udaipur. Both of them are to be honored by as Lifetime Achievement Award by Rajasthan Sociological Association. आप दोनों को बहुत बधाई और नमस्कार. I welcome to the convener of the conference, Shri T.N. Dubey, along with the office bearers and executive members of Rajasthan Sociological Association. All of them happen to be the organizers of this conference in such a difficult time. I further extend my heartfelt welcome to all the participants and paper presenters who have been registered and joined us for this virtual meet from different places of the country and abroad. Friends, being the current president of Rajasthan Sociological Association, I am supposed to deliver the presidential address too on this occasion. But I sense that it would be much better to be benefited by our honorable guests. I hope that e-version of my lecture would also be made available to all of you shortly. However, I would like to share a few words in very brief. Dear sir, we all have painfully experienced the crisis of global pandemic COVID-19 for the last 10 months. We have been battling against many challenges and odds. Almost every sector of the society struggled for existence. Educational sector too could not be spared. Rather, it was under the most difficult situation during lockdown period. Academic activities and physical mood were hampered. However, Rajasthan Sociological Association also continued to explore the opportunities, alternatives, and ultimately shifted to virtual mode to carry on the academic activities in crisis. I'm very happy to share that Rajasthan Sociological Association continued to play its role. The most significant event is to organize the annual conference, and once again, I am delighted to welcome you all on this auspicious occasion of the 27th annual conference on virtual platform. Friends, the recent publication of our e-newsletter is to be added in the continuity of our activities. Similarly, the publication of Rajasthan Journal of Sociology, 12th issue, to be released during inaugural session, and the current issue of the souvenir to be released during the present session are all enough evidence to ensure the path of endurance even during the most challenging time. I believe that the theme chosen for the conference, education and society, equity, justice and inclusion, is very much pertinent from various perspectives. I hope that fruitful contribution by way of presentations and deliberations on various issues would surely make this conference a grand success. Welcome you all once again for fruitful deliberations during the conference. Thank you so much and best wishes. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Rogera, for introducing the honorable speakers to the House. And thank you for informing us about the progress of RSA as a regional association. Thank you for sharing your recent experiences, which reflect ours also, that how we have been able to endure the difficult situation world over, and how we have shifted to the virtual mode of holding conference so that a continuity could be maintained. Thank you, sir. Friends, it's a great honor for us, for RSA, to have amongst us Professor Sari Hanafi, President, International Sociological Association, as the chief guest. Sir, your presence amongst us makes the nature of our conference truly international. We are extremely grateful to you for agreeing to be part of the inaugural session. And we are also grateful to you for starting your day early, that too on a Sunday, to be part of us. That makes the event even more special for all of us.
It's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure, really.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, I would request you to e-release the RSA journal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Kaur. I see the IT didn't allow me to start the video.
So maybe you can just click on the video.
No, I click, but the host is not allowing me. So can you ask the IT, please, to allow me to start video? In any case, I will wait.
Sir,
I am
waiting.
I made you the co-host, sir. I think you can do that now.
Okay. Okay, so just
Yes.
yes, sir. You're visible.
okay, so okay, now so hello everyone. Good morning. It is a very early morning on Sunday. So look, I spent yesterday just read some articles of this amazing journal, Rajasthan Journal of Sociology. I cannot tell you how much I appreciated in its, this is after 12 years of its presence, because it's one issue every year, and bilingual, and this is really what I found amazing, English and Hindi, and this is how I think we can bridge between local knowledge production and international knowledge production, and allow me, somebody Palestinian living in Lebanon, to read you while you are writing in English. So beyond this, again, beautiful pictures. Let's go in 2 minutes to see the table of content. So we have a sort of a keynote transcribed in the journal of Professor Shaduri on globalization as sociological perspective. We have a very interesting article from Professor Rajora. We just heard a few minutes ago, and others. I like the article on COVID-19. So it's really a timely topic, and we find that it's already in the journal, and then some Hindi articles. And I enjoy really so much reading the book reviews. I mean, what is produced in India. So I found it very interesting whether the book of Professor Bhargava. Of course, I read his work on secularism and its critics, because I am in sociology of religion. So I know him very well, but also a very interesting book of Professor Sharma about sociology in India. And then, of course, amazing book. I am not aware about it on Buhara and reform launched by women, and so I'm so glad really that to find in India such a good quality journal. So I invite you all really to read it. It's online, accessible. That's it. I will stop here.
Thank you, sir, for all the appreciation for our small efforts. This would really inspire us to go ahead in a more confident way in this direction. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure.
Thank you. We are blessed to have eminent sociologist, Professor Avijit Pathak from JNU with us. Sir, I invite you to kindly release the e-souvenir of the conference. Professor Pathak, please.
Sorry, ma'am, I will interrupt. I think souvenir has not reached, sir. I think Professor S.C. Rajora, I would request Professor S.C. Rajora to release.
Okay. Sir, Professor Rajora, sir, please you do the honors, sir.
Thank you, thank you. And, just a minute, please. शेयर करना है इसको यार म्यूट तो देखो Yes. So, is it visible?
Yes, sir.
So, I congratulate to our team, the editorial board of this souvenir, Rajasthan Sociological Association, 27th International Annual Conference, 2020 online on education and society, equity, justice, and inclusion. This souvenir includes the messages. At the outset, the first message is from our Honorable Governor, Rajasthan State, Shri Kalraj Mishra. And second message is from our Higher Education Minister, Shri Babar Singh Bhati. And other contents include message from my side as a president of RSA, our secretary, T.N. Dubey's message, as well as the list of participants is there, and the abstracts received from the participants, those who are going to present on different issues, are also included in this souvenir. So it's my pride privilege to release this souvenir and to share with you all. The e-version would be shortly available to all of you on our website. Meanwhile, you may please go through the PDF version, those who can access it on their WhatsApps or on their emails. And I think shortly it will be published on the website of Rajasthan Sociological Association. So once again, I congratulate our team editorial, and Rajasthan Sociological Association is the host. So I think I should congratulate one and all those who are members of Rajasthan Sociological Association. It is for the first time that we ourselves are the host to hold this conference. Otherwise, the conferences were to be organized by the institutions, by the departments, and RSA remain in the requesting mode. So thank you so much. And again, my best wishes to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rajora, for the e-release of the souvenir. Sir, I would like to state that it's under your able and affable presidentship that RSA has been able to achieve what all it has achieved. Thank you, sir, so much. Moving to the next, I would like to inform that since 2017, RSA has been organizing Professor I.P. Modi Memorial Oration during its annual conferences, in which eminent sociologists are invited to give their discourses on some contemporary social issues. In that strain, I introduce Professor Avijit Pathak, who has very kindly agreed to do us the honor. Professor Pathak from Center of the Social Systems, from the Center of Study of Social Systems, JNU, specializes in sociology of education. He has several publications to his credit. He extensively reflects on contemporary social issues and is a regular contributor to national dailies. Sir, your mere presence amongst us enhances the level of our conference. I would also like to inform the House that for the deliberations of this session to be perfect, for the inaugural session, we have slotted some time for queries and clarifications towards the end of the session. So all the participants are requested to note down their queries, which can be taken up in the last session. Now I humbly request Professor Pathak for the keynote address and for the 4th I.P. Modi Oration lecture. Welcome, sir.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, friends, colleagues, young researchers and teachers. And I'm grateful to Rajasthan Sociological Association for giving me an opportunity to be part of this important session. As I begin this morning, one thing that comes to my mind is that I was one of those fortunate enough to meet late Professor I.P. Modi, and I met him twice. Once in Jammu during the sociology conference, and another time at my own university. In our annual meeting, he was external member and he came. And what strikes my mind that these two meetings, I found some extraordinary qualities in his being. And that quality, which is very rare these days among academics, because quite often with our egotistic pride of CV, we carry the burden of knowledge. But what distinguished Professor Modi was, as the Buddhists would often talk about, the lightness of being, his warmth, his smile, his lightness of being, his gentleness, his humility, and his urge to understand others, interest in others. As Martin Buber would have said, no communion is possible without acknowledging the presence of the other. And he could acknowledge the presence of everybody, including a young learner and a young student. That remains with me, the way I saw him. And these two meetings were very important meetings in my life. Another thing which I feel as I read him, that a wide variety of interests that Professor Modi had, ranging from, when he's very well known about his work on leisure studies, his work on tourism, his work on mass media, his work on education youth, and also the sociological studies in India and the sociological theories. So wide range of interest that characterized him. And he was also a great inspirer, an extraordinary teacher, a researcher. His association with another great sociologist and great professor, Professor Joginder Singh, was remarkable, was truly meaningful. So his wide variety of interest, and as an inspirer, as an institution builder, as a great scholar and great teacher, he kept his presence felt. And I think that all of us present here, are reasonably familiar with the contributions that he made to the development of Indian sociology. And as a teacher, as a professor, he nurtured young minds, he nurtured young scholars and students. And another thing which I believe is absolutely important on this occasion to recall is that, that unlike many metropolitan intellectuals in the country, intellectuals situated in select centers of excellence who unfortunately speak only English, write only in English, and communicate in English, Professor Dubey, IP Professor Modi, was refreshingly different. He was one of those intellectuals, one of those professors who was extremely well in the bilingual traditions. And as a result, his commitment to Hindi and the development of sociological writing, good research, important, meaningful sociological writing in Hindi, that I believe was remarkable. In a way, he succeeded in coming out of that trap of being in which, for instance, many metropolitan intellectuals today are trapped. Their inability to communicate with our languages, in our languages. That I believe was a very remarkable contribution of Professor Modi. When my student and friend and colleague, Dr. Dubey, talked to me, and I was engaged in an act of communication with him. And we thought that on this occasion, and since the major theme is on education and society, issues of emancipation and inclusion, so I thought that possibly it would not be a bad idea to reflect on and share some of my views with you, keeping the broader interest of education in mind, that about some of my classroom experiences. And these experiences are related to, in the process of teaching sociological theories. And I shared it with Ribhu that something on that is it possible to build a bridge between sociological theories and Indian social thought? Because that was a question that always confronted me as a teacher, as a learner. And all that I'm going to speak today, this is nothing bookish. All that I have learned as a teacher over 30 years in my classroom, in the process of interaction with young minds, with young students, and teaching, as most of you as teachers would accept, is a perpetual process of learning, because as it teaching is the finest form of studentship. And it is in this context, some of the ideas with which I'm trying to grow every day, every moment, that I wish to share with you in terms of the relationship between theory and Indian social thought. To begin with, let me make 3 quick points and the quick observations, which all of you who teach sociological theories in Indian universities and colleges, I hope, must agree with you. That when a student comes to the sociology class and a sociological theory paper is offered to them, generally the student begins to think that the theory is something external, theory is something distant, theory is something abstract, and theoreticians are the ones who live in a different planet. And the second, they tend to think, particularly in countries which had an experience of colonialism, countries which have been colonized. And because, unfortunately, of the one way of traffic of knowledge and transaction, students tend to think theory means essentially Western theories, theories which have emerged from the leading metropolitan centers from the Euro-American institutes and the universities. So they would argue that theory is essentially about functionalism, structural functionalism, phenomenology, existentialism, postmodernism, critical theory, Marxism, things like that. And a set of names would be uttered, right from Max Weber to Talcott Parsons, to Althusser to Gramsci, to Deleuze and Foucault to Judith Butler. So this is the way, for example, the student come to the classroom, that theory is distant, theory is abstract, and theory is essentially the Western theory. And the third, many of them would think, and where many of us are also responsible because of our pure pedagogy, that students tend to think that theory is essentially an intellectual puzzle, playing with mystified language, difficult words, difficult concepts, which jokingly I say that Foucault in the right pocket, Judith Butler in the left pocket, and in mouth, it is Althusser and Talcott Parsons. So many of us tend to think, many students tend to think, theory is like, a very mystified, abstracted language, and it is essentially an intellectual game. And it is essentially an intellectual game devoid from the poetry, devoid from existence, from experience. Theory has no soul. Theory has no poetry. And the words that in the theory class you would utter, these words do not have a soul. These words do not shed tears. These are abstract, distant, mystified, impersonal. And to be a theoretician is to be a master of this intellectual game. And this is like erecting a wall of separation between, as many would argue, theoretical Brahmins and empirical Shudras. This, I believe, is something which many begin to carry with them. Now, as a teacher, one of the important challenges that I felt that we must intervene. We must change this way of teaching theory and this orientation to theory. And it is only possible when we bring theory nearer to life, nearer to my time, to our time, nearer to history. And that is something that as I keep engaging with young learners and students, share with them that from near to far, as all great pedagogues would argue, that it is important to begin from near to far. We didn't experience Holocaust, but we experienced partition. We experienced colonialism, the trauma and the violence of colonialism. We didn't experience the way Enlightenment modernity caused the imagination of the modern West. We experienced something else. Our familiarity with our own history, our embeddedness, which is so important, a sense of history, a sense of my location, and which, for example, when we teach theory from this part of the world, not in an Euro-American university, but in this part of the world, in a Gorakhpur college, in a university in Rajasthan, in a center of learning in Kochi or Calicut, we have our history, we have our memories. Now, how with this history, these memories, this embeddedness, we engage with the theories? That becomes, I believe, absolutely important. And that is where the second point that in which I wish to intervene and engage with students is that when we relate theory to our experience, and then another thing happens, that we no longer become tape recorders. We no longer become passive receivers and consumers of theories. We become active interpreters. We begin to engage in a dialogue with theory. And only then is it possible that our students would not behave like very robotic performers and tape recorders. And this is something that happens that is very painful. You tell an average sociology student, you just use the word suicide, and very mechanically he would say, Emile Durkheim. You use the word capitalism, very mechanically he would use the word Marx and Althusser. You say gender, very mechanically he or she would use the word Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler. And this is something very pathetic. This is something very unfortunate. It is almost like a parrot repeating, the age-old scriptures. And this is something that has to be altered. Yes, Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler, Deleuze and Foucault, Hegel and Marx, Althusser and Gramsci have to be read. But they have to be read not as passive consumers, but they have to be read. A dialogue has to be engaged with. And dialogue is possible only when I also know you and I also are located in our history, in our traditions, in our idioms. And this is where my third point lies, that it is important in our theory class to create a dialogic mind, not the passive imitators, passive consumers of Talcott Parsons and Michel Foucault, phenomenology and structural functionalism and structuralism, but an active creator, interpreter, the dialogic mind. And this is something which I often say, it's like coming to the classroom with two books simultaneously in the hand. One, say, on Karl Popper's Conjectures and Refutations, and in the right hand, a very ancient Indian text, Gautama's Nyaya, Gautama's theory of logic and reasoning. On the one hand, Popper talks about the development of modern science, how the theory of falsification ought to characterize science, not the conformity, but theory of falsification, and how scientific propositions are conjectures. These are subject to falsification. These are not like solid rocks. So science evolves through trial and error, through conjectures and reputations and falsification. And likewise, but is it that the way we look at the world only began with Thomas Kuhn and Karl Popper, Francis Bacon and René Descartes? Or is it that in this part of the world, from ages, people were thinking, evolving methods to look at the world? Think of Gautama's logic, perception, inference, analogy, implication that he would talk about. I just see the fire, I just see the smoke in the hill. And Gautama would argue that I immediately arrive at a conclusion, there is fire in the hill. I have not perceived, I have not seen the fire, but out of my previously perceived experience, now I arrive at a conclusion that wherever there is fire, there is smoke. So I saw the smoke in the hill and I arrive at a conclusion, there is a fire. So a great deal of logic and reasoning evolved. And imagine how wonderful it would have been had our student also been rooted in all that happened in this part of the world. When we look at the world, when we evolve logic and reasoning, only then the mind would become dialogic. That mind would converse with Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn, Francis Bacon and René Descartes. A dialogic mind would be created. Or you speak of Freudian psychoanalysis. You speak of the eros and the thanatos and the Freudian anxiety-ridden man. The ego is torn between the dark demand of the dark horses, the unconscious, the instincts, and the civilizational conscience, the superego, the tormented ego. And on the other, Shankho theory of yoga, or for example, when you speak of the different qualities of being, tamas, rajas, and the sattvic qualities, and this entire dynamics of the human personality, the physical, the material, the psychic, the mental, and the existential, and the spiritual. Now, I think that it is important that when we are rooted in our traditions, the traditions of the knowledge, and engage in a conversation, the mind becomes extremely dialogic mind. It no longer remains a passive mind. And this is like decolonizing theories, decolonizing ideas, and relating theory to our context and situation. So we no longer become merely the passive receivers of theory. We now engage in a conversation. We come forward with our own theories, with our own understanding. That, I believe, is a very important educational challenge. And as time is limited, it is in this context to make my point to building that rhythmic bridge between theory, which is being taught in our university generally in the name of theory, the Western theories, and then I try to build the bridge between theory and the Indian social thought, the modern Indian social thought, with two illustrations. One is, of course, the entire understanding of modernity. And we all know that large part of sociology and sociological theory that we study in Indian universities, say, for example, we teach them Auguste Comte, Durkheim, Weber, and Marx, and then we teach them Talcott Parsons, the Robert Merton, the phenomenology, Alfred Schulz, and all that, Garfinkel, and then we teach them critical theory, Marcuse, Habermas, and then we teach them Foucault, Zygmunt Bauman, Deleuze, all that in the theory classes. Absolutely fine. But then just think of it that when these theories emerged, particularly the classical theory, it emerged, as Robert Nisbet said very beautifully, that all these three great sociologists, Durkheim, Weber, and Marx, they were essentially drawing the landscape of industrial capitalism in the West. And they were trying to draw the landscape of industrial capitalism and trying to make sense of modernity. Durkheim was doing it through the questions of solidarity and the division of labor. Weber was trying to draw that landscape through the new forms of rationality and the authority that has emerged. And Marx was trying to see the very historical character of the modern industrial capitalism with the notion of the dialectical reasoning and the historical materialism. It emerged out of that context that the Enlightenment, the modernity, the industrial capitalism, the birth of the nation state, and the classical sociology was trying to see it. It emerged as a product of that project. It tried to project of modernity and try to understand that modern landscape that these three thinkers were drawing. But what was interesting is that there was also a great apprehension about the emergent crisis, the crisis of modernity. And that crisis of modernity, even in the classical sociological writing, we could begin to see. Imagine that famous essay that Weber wrote, Science as a Vocation. And when Weber invoked Leo Tolstoy, and when Tolstoy asked the question that for modern civilized man, life seems to have lost its meanings because it doesn't have any answer to the question of death. And unless we do not understand death, we do not understand life quite well. In other words, as now by invoking that, Weber was trying to argue, although the science has grown, the intellectualization has emerged with the modernity, the rationalization has emerged, but it cannot provide the meaning to the most fundamental values. It can give me the means to achieve an end, but it cannot tell me that whether that end itself is the desirable end. So in the hospital, when one is admitted, the doctor can put you into the ventilation machine, but the doctor cannot tell you that whether that life under the ventilator is worth living at all or not. Whether the death can become only a sanitized death in the intensive care unit of a super specialty hospital, or whether death has another meaning. Death can be a different kind of death. That question modern medicine doesn't have an answer. And that, as Weber was reflecting on that science as a vocation, that ambiguity. And that also we see that Weberian anguish over the disenchantment of the age, the modernity and the associated disenchantment. And imagine that when you read Marx's passage, all the heavenly ecstasies have been drowned into the icy water of egotistic calculation. You almost feel that it is William Wordsworth or William Blake writing this line. Marx was quoting Shakespeare and Balzac in economic and philosophic manuscripts. And there was also, for example, Marx's tremendous existential and spiritual critique of modern capitalism, the alienated, crippled existence of human beings, where human beings have lost their connectedness from their creative soul, and human beings have become merely a measurable product, a quantifiable product, which Marx again would elaborate in Capital Volume 1 as commodity fetishism. The relationships between two humans have been commodified and objectified between two things. And this critique could further develop with the growth of totalitarianism and fascism in Europe, the critical theory, the writings of Adorno, Marcuse, and others, that entire critique of the instrumental reasoning and the instrumental rationality, critique of positivism, its separation of the knower and the known, and the way it objectifies the world and causes violence, and the critique of that culture industry, the way the new left would come in a very sharp critique of modernity. Now, when you teach those things to students, one of the important questions that students ask, that when all those things were happening, what was happening here in this part of the world? Is it that in the world only Max Weber, Adorno, and Marcuse were thinking about the destiny of our times, about the age of modernity? Was there something happening in India, in Africa, in Sri Lanka, in other part of the world? Or were we just silent? We didn't think anything. Now there was something great was happening here in this country. And imagine, for example, just to think of, the text that Gandhi was writing in 1909 in the process of the sea journey, the Hind Swaraj, and the way now Gandhi was, which now Hind Swaraj becomes a very important text for a lot of post-colonial theorists today. Gandhi was talking about, for example, in the Hind Swaraj, in the process of a conversation between the reader and between the two selves, in a way metaphorical, colonized self and the decolonized consciousness, and where, for example, Gandhi was critiquing that entire discourse of colonial modernity, its brute force, its greed, its irresistible aggression and the desire. And as a result, Gandhi's plea for Swaraj as self-reliance, the oceanic circles, the decentralization, his critique of the gigantic bureaucratic machinery, and also, for instance, the cult of the desire and the greed and the consumerism. So the way now Gandhi would try to decolonize it, decolonize the consciousness, decolonize the self, and evolve a sharp critique of the modernity. And Gandhi could see that colonialism was also a product of that modernist agenda of victory, progress. So it just does not colonize the physical space. As Ashish Nandi said very beautifully, it colonizes the mind, it colonizes the psyche, it colonizes our way of thinking and consciousness. Now in Hind Swaraj, Gandhi was trying to decolonize it, creating a consciousness of decolonization, evolving a critique of that. Likewise, for example, there's a beautiful book. Sri Aurobindo was writing The Human Cycle, where Aurobindo was talking about the crisis of the age of reason. And in the crisis of the age of reason, Aurobindo was saying this crisis was reflecting itself in two ways. On the one hand, the capitalism, the modern industrial capitalism, with its reckless competitiveness and the social Darwinism and the survival of the fittest. And on the other, the implicit totalitarianism in the Stalinist socialism, it's totalitarianism, it's reckless urge to homogenize, absolute control over the state, over people's soul, people's life. And the age of reason is caught into these two crises. Is it possible to evolve a new age, seeing beyond the age of reason, manifesting itself in the capitalist social Darwinism as well as the Stalinist totalitarianism? Is it possible to think of a new age? And that was the question Aurobindo was asking. And Aurobindo was talking about another age, the age that does not deny reason, but transcends that reason and thinks of another kind of communion between the reason and the supra-reason, between the reason and man's profound spiritual consciousness. Now, is it possible now to reconcile the science and the spirituality, science and the poetry? Now, this is a very important question that now Aurobindo was raising. And likewise, Ambedkar, in the book on Marx and Buddha, while Ambedkar was comparing the two, on the one hand, Ambedkar's modernist self, heavily influenced by the French Revolution and the discourses of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But at the same time, in Buddha and Marx, Ambedkar's invocation of Gautam Buddha. And now, as he would argue, that the hierarchical mind, the caste consciousness, the mind that hierarchizes, that is exclusivist, the mind that is violent, that cannot be altered merely through legislation. That mind has to be altered also by altering the inner disposition of the mind. And it was here Ambedkar's engagement with Buddhism began. Ambedkar's engagement with Buddhism began. And when you look at Ambedkar's engagement with Buddhism, Gandhi's hermeneutic engagement with Bhagavad Gita, Sri Aurobindo's critique of the age of reason and striving for a new kind of synthesis between the science and the spirituality, then we begin to see that a great deal of thought took place here. And how interesting it would have been had, for example, in our theory classes, we could have asked students that read Herbert Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man today, and tomorrow come with Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, and just ask two students, you are Herbert Marcuse, you are Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Initiate a conversation and dialogue on the age of modernity and consumerism and the needs. The way Marcuse would talk about a new form of social control has emerged in the modern age. And that new form of social control is based on what consumerism creates. We are all trapped into the market-driven needs. And as a result, the mind becomes increasingly one-dimensional, and it leads to a kind of totalitarianism. Gandhi was saying, mind has become like a restless bird. The more it desires, the more it seeks to possess, and the more it seeks to possess, the more violent it becomes. Now, this is where, for example, is it possible, how wonderful it would have been, how One-Dimensional Man, the critical theory, and Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, or for instance, Zygmunt Bauman, Modernity and Holocaust, and Sri Aurobindo's The Human Cycle. These two books students read, and as a result, a conversation begin to take place. That was, I believe, a search for a dialogic mind. And I would just end, friends, with another point, which is about our times. And I believe that classroom cannot be separated from the world out there. And it's a myth if we seek to propagate that the storm outside the world should not be allowed to enter the corridors of the university, should not be allowed to enter into the classroom. Now, can you teach Foucault's panopticon and discipline in a classroom where there is a CCTV camera? Now, is it possible, and how we engage with Foucault in a classroom where there is a CCTV camera, where there is biometric, how we talk about power, discipline, and surveillance? So the point I'm trying to say is that it is important to bring theory and the world, that is the way the world is unfolding itself out there. And it is in that context I would just end. Look at our times, and I mean our society today. And if I make a broad generalization, and forgive me for that, then we could see there is a very unholy alliance of the two forces. One is the neoliberalism, the neoliberal global capitalism, and the other is militant religious nationalism. And it's an unholy alliance of these two forces, neoliberal global capitalism and militant religious nationalism. And look at it. And the way it is happening in our life, in the life of a young student, in our life, that we are essentially, it has generated two prominent identities among us. One, in the market, you and I are consumers. So on the one hand, we are all consuming. The market wants us to consume with the mythical notion of a good living and the seduction of the market. We are all consumers. And on the other, the religious nationalism would argue that we are all militant nationalists today, and that nationalism has to constantly manifest itself through external symbolization. It has to be proved time and again. It is like saying that if suddenly a brilliant Pakistani fast bowler unsettles Virat Kohli and Virat Kohli is out, even achieving the 10 digit, even achieving 5 or 6 runs, I have almost forgotten the art of clapping the Pakistani fast bowler because I no longer appreciate cricket. I look at cricket now through the prism of military nationalism. Cricket is a surgical strike. Cricket is a surgical strike. War and surgical strike as metaphors have entered into our consciousness, into our lives. So in such a world where we are either nationalists, militant nationalists, or consumers, in such a world, how do we teach theory? And it is here, I believe, that when we teach theory, again, I would say that Zygmunt Bauman's Modernity and Holocaust, Herbert Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man, Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, and Rabindranath Tagore's important writings on nationalism, the way that Tagore would say that how militant nationalism, it can become a monster because the militant nationalism as an ideology can deprive us of the creative flow of life energy, of the creative flow of life energy. And that's why in one of his classic novel, Gora, when Gora ultimately realizes, so long he lived his life as a very Puritan Hindu, but almost at the end of the novel, Gora came to know that he was essentially being adopted by Anandamayi and Krishna Dayal, his parents, who adopted him, and he is essentially a child of the Irish parents, and the Irish parents who died during the mutiny. And Gora, as a baby, was found by Krishna Dayal and Anandamayi. He adopted him. And when Gora came to know about it, he passed through an extreme form of existential crisis. Who am I? So far, I have lived as a Puritan Hindu, but now suddenly I come to know that I am a child of the Irish parents. And ultimately, Gora resolves this existential anxiety, this identity confusion, ultimately at the end of the Loven by his surrender to Anandamayi, the mother. And the Gora says that when I hug you, my mother, then all my dilemmas are overcome. You are my India. You have no religion. You have no caste. You are transcendental. You are oceanic. And that possibly also would be reflected in one of the fantastic poems in Gitanjali, that India is like a confluence of multiple currents, multiple traditions. These days, Swami Vivekananda is often invoked by the nationalists. But imagine Vivekananda's famous speech at the Chicago Religious Congress. And he began the speech by saying that I come from a civilization where right from the very beginning, I have been taught an Upanishadic message and the lesson that the rivers have their distinctive names so long as they have not marched with the ocean. And the moment they march with the ocean, they become part of the ocean. They lose their distinctiveness, you know. And imagine the restricted, narrow, limited, aggressive, militant mindset which we are today finding ourselves. So either I'm a nationalist or a consumer. Under these circumstances, how we rediscover critical theory, how we rediscover Zygmunt Bauman, how we rediscover Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore and some of our ideas. That is theory. That is bringing life into the theory, bringing classroom to the dynamics of life. And I would say that's the poetry of theory. That's the poetry of theory and the poetry of sociology. Thank you very much for bearing me, for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pathak, for enlightening us on so many facets of theory and how we should interact with our own experiences. Sir, you have beautifully recollected your association with Professor Modi. You have beautifully enumerated his works and his contribution as a teacher and as an inspirer. You beautifully sketched his persona, which I'm sure would inspire the young scholars to follow his path. Sir, you raised a very pertinent, very important dilemma which all of us face as students as well as teachers of sociology, the interface of theory with sociological thought, with experience. When we relate with theory, as you have said rightly, theory with our experience, as you have rightly said, that we should not be just passive consumers of knowledge. Rather, we should also engage in dialogue, in conversation, and that is how we'll be able to realize the ultimate meaning of education. That's how we'll be able to realize that. Sir, you very beautifully showed how Gandhi, Aurobindo, Ambedkar, they related to their experience and enriched the theoretical perspectives. I'm sure, sir, your elocution would pave our way, enlighten us, and guide us through our roles as teachers and scholars who would follow the path of participation and conversation and dialogue, and not just be passive consumers of knowledge. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving to the next part of the program, the RSA, it has a tradition of conferring lifetime achievement awards on eminent scholars and individuals who have significantly contributed to the growth and development of sociology in Rajasthan. For today, the first award, the Lifetime Achievement Award, is to be conferred on Professor S.P. Gupta. And for that, I invite Dr. Meenakshi Meena, for the Vice President RSA, for the citation. Over to you, Dr. Meenakshi.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for inviting me. Good afternoon, everyone. मेरे लिए बड़ा खुशी का मौका है और कि मुझे एक तो हिंदी में बोलने का मौका मिला है. उम्मीद करती हूँ सर आप लोगों को समझ आएगा क्योंकि अभी तक फर्स्ट मेरा ही है जो मातृभाषा में साइटेशन होने जा रहा है. थैंक यू मैम. शुरुआत करना चाहूंगी मैं 2 लाइनों से. जिसके प्रति मन में सम्मान होता है, जिसकी डांट में भी एक अद्भुत ज्ञान होता है, जो जन्म देता है महान शख्सियतों को, वह गुरु तो सबसे महान होता है. यहाँ उपस्थित सभी मेरे गुरुजन एवं मेरे सभी साथियों को मेरा नमस्कार। मुझे अत्यंत हर्ष व खुशी की अनुभूति हो रही है कि आज इस 27वें अंतर्राष्ट्रीय राजस्थान समाजशास्त्रीय सम्मेलन में RSA प्रोफेसर SP गुप्ता सर को उनके महत्वपूर्ण कार्यों और योगदान जो कि उन्होंने सोशियोलॉजी समाजशास्त्र के लिए दिए हैं के लिए उन्हें RSA आजीवन उपलब्धि सम्मान पत्र प्रदान करने जा रहा है। अवार्ड देने से पहले मैं डॉक्टर मीनाक्षी मीना, असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर JNVU जोधपुर, वाइस प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ RSA, मैं उनका सम्मान पत्र आप सभी के साथ साझा करना चाहूंगी। राजस्थान के समाजशास्त्रीय समुदाय में विद्वता, अकादमिक गुणवत्ता और नैतिकता को सर्वोपरि रखने की प्रतिभा के धनी प्रोफेसर SP गुप्ता सर ने 32 वर्षों तक जय नारायण व्यास विश्वविद्यालय जोधपुर को अपनी सेवाएं प्रदान की। इस विश्वविद्यालय में आप समाजशास्त्र विभाग में आचार्य और विभागाध्यक्ष भी रहे, साथ ही प्रॉक्टर के पद को भी आपने शोभित किया। राष्ट्रीय सेवा योजना से जुड़े रहकर समर्पण, स्वाभिमान और नेक नियत से अपने कर्तव्यों का निर्वहन भी किया और इसी विश्वविद्यालय से आप सेवानिवृत्त भी हुए। उत्तर प्रदेश के विश्वविख्यात सांस्कृतिक एवं धार्मिक दृष्टि से महत्वपूर्ण नगर गोरखपुर में 14 जनवरी 1957 में आपका जन्म हुआ। आपने प्रारंभिक शिक्षा गोरखपुर से प्राप्त की, साथ ही स्नातक व स्नातकोत्तर शिक्षा का अध्ययन गोरखपुर विश्वविद्यालय से ही किया। स्नातकोत्तर परीक्षा में आपने मेरिट में सर्वोच्च स्थान अर्जित कर स्वर्ण पदक भी प्राप्त किया। आपकी PhD की उपाधि भारतीय प्रौद्योगिकी संस्थान IIT कानपुर से हुई। प्रोफेसर गुप्ता सर को एक शिक्षाविद बनाने में प्रोफेसर SP नागेंद्र, प्रोफेसर KN शर्मा, प्रोफेसर PN रस्तोगी, प्रोफेसर राजेंद्र पांडे, प्रोफेसर VK जैरत आदि सभी का उल्लेखनीय योगदान रहा है। प्रोफेसर SP गुप्ता सर की 2 पुस्तकें और करीब 40 शोध पत्र प्रकाशित हुए हैं। उनके सभी शोध पत्र काफी उच्च कोटि के रहे, जिनका प्रकाशन मैन इन इंडिया, मैन एंड लाइफ, सोशियोलॉजिकल बुलेटिन, इंडियन जर्नल ऑफ सोशल एंथ्रोपोलॉजी एंड इंडियन जर्नल ऑफ सोशियोलॉजिकल स्टडीज में हुआ है। प्रोफेसर गुप्ता सर एक अच्छे विश्लेषक, तर्ककर्ता और स्पष्ट वक्ता के रूप में भी जाने जाते हैं। समाजशास्त्र में शोध कार्य के प्रति आपकी रुचि के कारण आपने कई शोध परियोजनाओं को सफलतापूर्वक पूर्ण किया है। आपका चयन यूनेस्को द्वारा प्रायोजित कंप्यूटर प्रशिक्षण कार्यक्रम के लिए भी हुआ। आप एक संदर्भ व्यक्ति के रूप में कई विश्वविद्यालय से जुड़े रहे और अनेकों अकादमिक संगोष्ठियों और सम्मेलनों में आपकी भागीदारी सक्रिय रही है। वर्तमान में आप आयुर्वेदिक विश्वविद्यालय जोधपुर की एथिक्स समिति के सदस्य भी हैं। प्रोफेसर SP गुप्ता सर ने राजस्थान में लंबे अरसे तक समाजशास्त्र के लिए अपना महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दिया है और उनके इन उल्लेखनीय योगदान और कार्यों जो कि समाजशास्त्र के लिए उन्होंने किए हैं, उसके लिए RSA हमेशा गौरवान्वित रहा है। और आज इस 27वें अंतर्राष्ट्रीय राजस्थान समाजशास्त्रीय सम्मेलन में के उपलक्ष्य पर हम सर को आजीवन उपलब्धि सम्मान पत्र प्रदान करने जा रहे हैं। हमारी पूरी RSA की टीम की तरफ से मैं मीनाक्षी मीना अब आपको इंट्रोड्यूस कराती हूँ, SP गुप्ता सर की तरफ ले जाती हूँ जो कि हमारे समक्ष उपस्थित है। सॉरी, थोड़ा वेट करने के लिए। हमारे सामने SP गुप्ता जी सर मौजूद हैं, तो डॉक्टर शैलेंद्र गहलोत सर से रिक्वेस्ट करती हूँ कि माला पहनाकर आप उनका स्वागत करें। सर। राजूरा सर क्लियर है?
हाँ बिल्कुल क्लियर है मैम, क्लियर है।
ओके सर। और शॉल उड़ाकर सर को सम्मानित करें। डॉक्टर सोनिया शर्मा, इनसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि आरएसए की तरफ से सर को मोमेंटो प्रदान करें। सोनिया मोमेंटो इधर। और मैं भी इस मौके पर देखिए पीछे नहीं रहूंगी, सम्मान पत्र देकर अपना आरएसए की टीम की तरफ से सम्मान पत्र उनको अर्जित करती हूँ। सर से रिक्वेस्ट है कि सर आप अपने 2 मिनट हमें दें आरएसए के लिए और अपने भाव से हमें व्यक्त करें। हाँ सर।
Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi Meena.
सर हाँ सर प्लीज।
First of all, I would like to thank organizers of Rajasthan Sociological Conference 2020, and it is my privilege to be honored by our society on the occasion of this conference. I am especially thankful to Professor S.C. Rajora, Dr. T.N. Dubey, and other members of the Rajasthan Sociological Society. Though I have been given Lifetime Achievement Award for my contribution in the field of sociology, but very humbly I accept that whether I have contributed anything or not in the field of sociology, I cannot judge. As far as achievement is concerned, whatever I have achieved in my career, I have been already awarded as a lecturership, as a associate professorship, and as a professorship. But as contribution is concerned, it has to be judged by sociological fraternity that really I have contributed or not. It is my satisfaction that when I come to the field of contribution, academic contribution has to be judged by our fraternity. But on various occasions, I feel that whatever responsibilities, whatever duties have been assigned to me, that I have done with my full dedication and devotion, without any prejudice, without any bias. And this attitude of mine has created many enemies in the field of academics also, because I never compromised with the ethics, with the morality in the campus, in the recruitment process. And in this process, my various friends with whom I have served longer in my career, they have become my enemy. So I may be enemy for them. I would like to say that much of enemies, that glorifies me, that really I have done something. So that gives me a lot of satisfaction. Though I was not in favor of accepting this Lifetime Achievement Award, but I did not want to disappoint the organizers of the seminar. I humbly accept their request and I receive this honor which is being conferred to me on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. And I congratulate you for your honest depiction of the current status of I think it's true for all the subjects, sir, what you have said. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now, moving to the next part of our inaugural session. With great regard and respect, I introduce Professor Sari Hanafi, Professor of Sociology, Anthropology, and Media Studies at the American University of Beirut. He is the President of International Sociological Association. He has also served as visiting professor in universities at France, Italy, and Norway. He's the author of numerous journals and articles and book chapters too. He is the editor of Idafat, the Arab Journal of Sociology. Sir, today your presence amongst us, it symbolizes the meeting of the global with the local. So we are really honored to have you amongst us. Sir, I humbly invite you to enlighten us with your learnings and experiences as chief guest of the inaugural session. Professor Hanafi, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kerr. I'm so and trust technology and in Beirut, Lebanon. I will share with you PowerPoint. So, case of problem of listening to me, at least you can see something. Yeah. Okay. So again, today I would like to talk what would be post-COVID-19 sociology. And I'm so glad to talk, by the way, after Professor Pathak, his keynote, because really it's a continuity to what he said. So I am extremely honored today to be in such important and timely annual conference on education and society, equity, justice, and inclusion. This is really something dear to every society today in the global north or in the global south. On behalf of ISA, but International Sociological Association, but myself, I would like to thank your association for this invitation, and specifically Professor Rajora, President of RSA, and Professor Tribu, its secretary. And just to tell you that I have that ISA have a long-standing relationship to India, and we had Professor Omnan, TK Omnan, president of ISA from 1990 to 1994. And also we have some vice presidents. The last one I remember is Sujata Patel, a dear friend and social theorist that I inspire a lot in my scholarship. Okay, so let me go to my now my talk, just to remind you that really we live in so disruptive time with such epidemic, COVID-19. Almost by today, 106 million confirmed cases, but also more than 2 million deaths globally. So the surreal atmosphere of the COVID-19 has exposed fault line trust among human beings, among countries. Now we see concerning the vaccine, between citizens and government. And it's pushed us to raise big questions about ourselves, our relationship, and life generally. So this crisis is not just limited to public and environmental health or the economy, what we can witness today is a moment of truth regarding the crisis of late modernity and its capitalist system on the board. We are not, sorry, we will not be able to simply revert to business as usual after we get through this crisis, and the social science should work to both analyze and actively engage in addressing this new reality. And this is what I try to argue today. So 1 year ago, I wrote a piece in Current Sociology journal, ISA journal, called Toward the Global Sociology, where I include a call for the supervision of, a call for supplementing the current post-colonial approach with an anti-authoritarian one, and to rethink secularism in the framework of post-secularity. While this concern is still valid today, I would go farther to what COVID-19 forced us to rethink our discipline. So I will talk here only about 3 points. Building multi-level focus that branch from community to humanity. The second, to take an active approach in fighting against the disease of Anthropocene and Capitalocene, of course. And finally, to set a better agenda for recognition and moral obligation. So if I take the first point, again, COVID-19 show us how much we, as a world, we are interconnected. But we still need to generate more global solidarity and a moment, and more humanistic globalization. To do so, it requires a multi-scale conceptualization. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze once criticized the left, actually, say, look, they always they see the world from the most distance to inward, and by that you always focus on imperialism, colonialism, and when you come to your society, you use a social class concept as abstract concept, and you are so exhausted to deal with family, community, neighborhood, and things like that. If we look to currently many identity politics group, whether religious or not, including a Trump supporter, maybe Modi supporter in India, they work rather the community level. They are interested in family, individual, and go up from closer to distant. So I think what I'm arguing that really we need to think this where we put the focus. And actually, I am not localist. I think we need to do a back and forth movement. But really, here what I'm, if you like, a sort of a hidden criticism against our sociology, to say it's often don't care about the community level. And this is where I encourage people. Even if I think about other type of identity politics, like feminist, like many about relief, caring, etc. I think here where it depends the context where we see whether they focus on community or not. But nevertheless, I agree with Richard Rorty, who advanced that the cultural agenda of pluralism by cultural left, I mean, all this movement, civil rights movement, become at the expense of struggle for social science justice. Nancy Fraser also sharing wealth as a value compete with the meritocratic equality that is adopted by mainstream feminist movement. Somehow criticizing even this civil movement, civil rights movement, that they more and more they disconnect from a rural area, from this basis where the community is. So if you like, again, I would like that we think all that in how to create methods to use multi-scale focus, rethinking the importance of the family, community, and the ethics of love, hospitality, and caring, and then scaling up to the level of nation state and humanity as a whole. My second point is to argue that COVID-19 is a disease not only of globalization, but also Anthropocene. The creed of human consumerism, and Professor Pathak talk about that, is bleeding resources that our Earth cannot renew, and this virus is but one episode of this consumerism. This virus was transmitted from non-domesticated animal, we know civets, penguin, and bats, to human being through the consumption of these animals by those in China. Are they really tasty? I mean, again, here we can refer to Pierre Bourdieu, his amazing work on the distinction, that they it's a sign of distinction, pointing to the significant amount of unnecessary and luxurious object that we consume. I do remember when I was in China that they offer me many of this delicacy. It was very, very expensive. As a guest, just they give me dishes they didn't share with me because it was really expensive. But again, I found it untasty, but this is for them how the distinguishing something. So this is a mythological access to happiness, which ultimately serves as an effective accelerator for more health troubles, epidemics, death, and disaster, as we're witnessing today. So examining this multi-scale relationship cannot be done without reconnecting the individual, society, and the nature. So really, this is extremely important. Now, we cannot talk about society without talking about animal and plant and nature. Addressing climate change and the political economic system cannot be done without raising public awarenesses of the relationship of people to the earth and to humanity. This is actually, when I talk about Anthropocene killing our earth, it's not done by a human, Anthropocene by everyone. The anthro come from human. But I totally agree with the American sociologist Jason Moore, and I think many Indian scholars talk about that in fact, he proposed another concept, Capitolocene, because this is not the actors is the capitalists. So it's a kind of critical provocation to the sensibility of the Anthropocene. For him, capitalism is organizing nature as a whole. He proposed a concept also against as a similar toward history, toward ecology. He called world ecology that joins the accumulation of capital, the pursuit of power, and the co-production of nature. Here, where actually the Carpolani is extremely important in our thinking, this British anthropologist, and his concept, social embeddedness, where he talked about 3 forms of integration, of integrating society to economy: exchange, redistribution, and reciprocity. By exchange, the market as a place of exchange needs to be moralized, which includes establishing firm societal control against all forms of speculation. When he talked about this embeddedness in terms of redistribution, we cannot be, redistribution cannot be done without taking significant measures to prevent the concentration of wealth in a minority of companies in each sector. We know that. Without establishing heavy taxation of high levels of capitals and wealth, and without moving to a slow growth economy and its corollary. Of course, thinking about need to cheap and low carbon public transportation, public service, and again, just to remind you, the mentality of capitalists like Ronald Reagan, who said there are no such things as a limit to growth. I mean, the image that we can grow forever. Now, I would like to come to my 3rd point, politics of recognition, and taking the 3rd concept of embeddedness of Polanyi, reciprocity. Polanyi defines it as the mutual exchange of goods and services as part of a long-term relationships, where reciprocity and moral obligation are concerned, and concerns are added to contractual relationships. I would qualify this reciprocity in 2 ways: strong and weak. Strong, it requires politics of recognition, as the German philosopher Alexis Honneth developed in his book, famous book, Struggle for Recognition. So require politics of recognition between groups and networks which accept the identity of the others, which work in line with the paradigms of pluralism and multiculturalism. Functioning reciprocity is dependent on the strength and weakness of the moral obligations in social relationship. Strong social relationship may be seen in solidarity networks posited by Mark Granovetter, who argues that sometimes strong network relationships are gift-based relationships in a Marcel Mauss way. Alain Caillé, a French sociologist, pushed an anti-utilitarian hypothesis where the desire of human beings to be valued as givers means that our relationships are not solely based on interest alone, but in pleasure, moral duty, and spontaneity. Here, the gift only takes on its full meaning when understood as a mean, performer, and a symbol of public and private recognition. Unfortunately, this reciprocity relationship can be weak. Bruno Latour explained that while people may not necessarily be ignoring climate change, they don't feel as though they belong to the land in which they live, and in turn may move quickly to other places or as the individual exit strategy. Let me move now to my conclusion. COVID-19 sociology will only have meaning if it is armed with an utopia or realist utopia, as that even if it is not a fully realizable, will direct our actions. There is no ethical life without utopia, and the difference between clerical preachings and sociologist utopia is that the latter doesn't necessarily denounce the anti-utopian vision of the others, and may even seek to work with those who believe in it, i.e. putting emphasis on dialogue. This sociology thus should appreciate and further the Maussian, Marcel Mauss gift relationships and the moral obligation connecting the social science to moral philosophy. And this is here my thesis, if you like. It is important to rethink the construction of otherness, not only with regards to who is perceived as the adversary and why that may be, but with regard to how we care about the other. Here, serious ethical discussion could tame the pursuit of our own self-interest. This is a sense of euphorism, the aim of living a good life with and for the others in just institution, where in the other world, the ethics of love, hospitality, care, and solitude with and for others may be included in institutional frameworks to ensure and reinforce welfare state, social justice, and democracy. This is in line with other anti-authoritarian sociology scholars. I belong to them, and we can propose different manifesto, and it was a manifesto of convivialism, if you like, and we are in the second format of it. It's in multi-language, including French, English, Italian, Arabic, etc., calling for convivialism as a successor of the ideology of communism, socialism, and anarchism. My last slides. We need to think responsibility versus freedom and how to foster and encourage meaningful relationships to our other fellow of a human being. Sociology should go back to those and other salient insights of philosophers such as Emmanuel Levinas, who simply and astutely explain, before cogito, there is hello. Avant le cogito, il y a le bonjour. In order to develop this moral sociology as a practical philosophy, we need to overcome the separation between philosophy and science, the transcendental and the empirical, the normative and the descriptive in a moral sociology. If the ethical turn of sociology has already there, more to reinforce it by proposing normative methods, propositions, and commitment is explicit. All about commitment, it is important to view moral commitments and living up to them, but to engage actively in supporting civil society and social movement. Finally, the elephant in the room is religion. And I come from an area where religion is extremely important, and I know India is the same. The connection between moral philosophy and social science should pay more attention to the role of religion as one of the source of ethics, important not only as an advocate for some virtue, but as a provider of training through ritual. This is through rituals. This is why religion is important. By doing this, tailored secularist system in post-secularity framework will be more tolerant to non-authoritarian presence of religion. And I agree with our keynote today about that the the ethno-religious nationalism is terrible. So, no, we need non-authoritarian presence of religion as an argumentation and manifestation in the public spheres, and forge more contextual models that advance our quest to welfare, social justice, democracy, and active citizenship. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening us about your thoughts on the current pandemic and the crisis it has generated world over. You have raised the tasks in front of sociology post-pandemic. You have said that we need to move towards humanistic globalization, wherein we have to rethink the importance of the family, community, and the ethics of love, and scaling up them to the level of humanity as a whole. You also have to understand the relationship of humans with nature and natural surroundings, especially in this era of accumulation of wealth. You have also raised the issue of politics of recognition and moral obligation. Reciprocity, you have said, can be strong or weak. Post-COVID, sociology would be meaningful only if it is armed with utopian ideas and it explores the constructs of ethics of love, hospitality, care, and includes them in their institutional frameworks. Lastly, you have also said that as sociologists, we have to overcome the separation between philosophy and science and recognize the role of religion in creating a better world for all of us. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us, for showing us the way forward post-pandemic. Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Now we move on to the next part of our inaugural session, wherein we connect to Udaipur team, wherein the Lifetime Achievement Award is to be conferred on Dr. Mridula Trivedi. So I hand over to Dr. Taru Surana for the citation.
My respectful good afternoon to all. It is my great privilege and honor to read this citation for respected Dr. Mridula Trivedi. Mridula ma'am taught me during my MA. Thereafter, I was again lucky that madam accepted me to supervise for my PhD, which I completed under her esteemed guidance. I always had and still get her special love and care. I thank RSA for giving me this special opportunity for my ma'am. Now, moving to citation. अकादमिक उपलब्धियों तथा साहित्यिक क्षमताओं के साथ राजस्थान के समाजशास्त्रीय जगत में अपनी पहचान बनाने के लिए डॉक्टर मृदुला त्रिवेदी को सम्मानित करते हुए राजस्थान समाजशास्त्र परिषद को हर्ष एवं गर्व की अनुभूति हो रही है। अध्यापन, शोध और लेखन कार्य में दक्षता प्रतिभा की धनी डॉक्टर मृदुला त्रिवेदी ने 29 वर्ष तक राजस्थान सरकार के उच्च शिक्षा विभाग में सेवाएं प्रदान की। राजकीय मीरा कन्या महाविद्यालय में समाजशास्त्र विभाग की विभागाध्यक्ष रहीं। विभिन्न प्रकार के संस्थानिक दायित्वों का पूर्ण निष्ठा और समर्पण भाव से निर्वहन किया तथा 6 शोधार्थियों को पीएचडी उपाधि प्रदान करवाने हेतु मार्गदर्शन किया एवं इसी महाविद्यालय से अधिवार्षिकी आयु के साथ सेवानिवृत्त हुई। डॉक्टर मृदुला त्रिवेदी का जन्म राजस्थान की सूर्य नगरी के नाम से प्रसिद्ध जोधपुर शहर में 6 अगस्त 1955 को हुआ। आपने स्नातकोत्तर एवं पीएचडी उपाधि मोहनलाल सुखाड़िया विश्वविद्यालय उदयपुर से और एमफिल की उपाधि पंजाब विश्वविद्यालय चंडीगढ़ से प्राप्त की। आप भातखंडे संगीत महाविद्यालय लखनऊ से सितार वादन में संगीत विशारद हैं। डॉक्टर त्रिवेदी ने दक्षिण राजस्थान के जनजातीय समुदाय पर शोध कार्य किया। माणिक्यलाल वर्मा जनजातीय शोध संस्थान में भी आपने सेवाएं प्रदान की। इस समय अवधि में जनजातीय समुदाय के विविध क्षेत्रों में प्रशिक्षण, संगोष्ठियों और कार्यशालाओं का आयोजन और शोध संस्थान द्वारा प्रकाशित शोध पत्रिका ट्राइब का कौशल पूर्वक संपादन किया। साथ ही राजस्थान समाजशास्त्र परिषद द्वारा प्रकाशित न्यूज़लेटर का संपादन और राजस्थान जर्नल ऑफ सोशियोलॉजी के संपादक के रूप में अतुल्य योगदान दिया। यूजीसी द्वारा प्रायोजित 2 शोध परियोजनाओं को उत्कृष्टता के साथ पूर्ण किया। स्वतंत्र लेखक के रूप में एक पुस्तक तथा सहलेखक के रूप में दूसरी पुस्तक का स्तरीय प्रकाशन करवाया। राष्ट्रीय एवं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय शोध पत्रिकाओं में आपके अनेक शोध लेख प्रकाशित हुए हैं। डॉक्टर त्रिवेदी ने 57 से अधिक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलनों संगोष्ठियों में सक्रिय भागीदारी की एवं कई तकनीकी सत्रों की अध्यक्षता की। समाजशास्त्र की प्रतिष्ठित अकादमिक संस्थाओं से आपकी संबद्धता भी उल्लेखनीय है। आप अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समाजशास्त्री परिषद की सदस्य रही हैं और वर्तमान में इंडियन सोशियोलॉजिकल सोसाइटी तथा गुजरात समाजशास्त्री परिषद की आजीवन सदस्य हैं। आपने राजस्थान समाजशास्त्री परिषद के सह सचिव एवं उपाध्यक्ष पद पर भी कार्य किया है। डॉक्टर मृदुला त्रिवेदी राजस्थान सरकार के उच्च शिक्षा विभाग में रहते हुए समाजशास्त्र विषय एवं राजस्थान समाजशास्त्र परिषद के लिए लंबे अरसे तक अनुकरणीय योगदान करती रही हैं। उनके प्रशंसनीय कार्यों से राजस्थान समाजशास्त्र परिषद कृतार्थ है। एतत् उनको आजीवन उपलब्धि सम्मान प्रदान करती है। धन्यवाद।
आप यहीं बैठो, आप साइड में एक एक करते हुए गुलाबी इधर सर, आप इधर धन्यवाद तरु जी। मैं प्रोफेसर अडवाणी साहब से निवेदन करता हूं कि ये अभिनंदन पत्र आपके सम्मान में भेंट स्वरूप प्रदान करा। मैं प्रोफेसर सेल शर्मा साहब से निवेदन करूंगा कि आप स्मृति चिन्ह भेंट करा।
Both of them have been past presidents of Rajasthan Sociological Association. What an honor, sir. Thank you so much.
Dr. Shyam Kumawat sir. श्रीफल भेंट कर रहे हैं प्रोफेसर मधुसूदन जी त्रिवेदी सर।
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
बहुत बहुत बधाइयाँ।
हाँ मैडम बोल। थोड़ा सा पीछे, थोड़ा सा पीछे, बस ठीक। बैठिए बैठिए बैठ जाइए।
नमस्कार।
थोड़ा सा पीछे।
राजस्थान समाजशास्त्री परिषद के द्वारा जो ये आयोजन हो रहा है, सबसे सम्मानीय मंच और वेबिनार में सम्मिलित सभी स्नेहीजन, सबसे पहले तो मैं वेबिनार के आयोजकों को बधाई देना चाहती हूँ, क्योंकि इस कठिन समय में इतने महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर वे इसका आयोजन कर पाए। सारी टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ में इन सारी चीजों को कोऑर्डिनेट करके किसी भी समय, ऐसे समय में ऐसे वेबिनार का आयोजन करना बहुत सरल नहीं है। मैं राजस्थान समाजशास्त्र परिषद की कार्यकारिणी को धन्यवाद देना चाहती हूँ कि उन्होंने मुझे इस सम्मान के योग्य समझा। राजस्थान समाजशास्त्री परिषद पिछले करीब 1.5 वर्षों से एक अलग पहचान बना रही है। इसकी कार्यकारिणी के सदस्य और साथ में ही जो भी लोग इससे जुड़े हुए हैं, उन लोगों ने अपने कठिन परिश्रम से और डेडिकेशन से इसको एक नया स्वरूप प्रदान किया है। प्रतिवर्ष न्यूज़लेटर का प्रकाशन करना, जर्नल का प्रकाशन और हर साल कॉन्फ्रेंस आयोजित करना अपने आप में बहुत ही प्रशंसनीय कार्य है। मैं लंबे समय से बहुत तहे दिल से इस एसोसिएशन के साथ जुड़ी हूँ और आशा करती हूँ कि यह एसोसिएशन उत्तरोत्तर प्रगति करेगी और नए कीर्तिमान स्थापित करेगी। मेरे को जो ये सम्मान मिला है, विगत वर्षों में मैंने जो कुछ भी कार्य किया है, उसका संपूर्ण श्रेय मेरे गुरुजनों को है। प्रोफेसर शील शर्मा सर, प्रोफेसर नरेश भार्गव और प्रोफेसर मोहन अजवानी सर, इन लोगों के प्रोत्साहन और प्रेरणा के कारण ही मैं कुछ भी करने में सक्षम हो पाई। हमने लगभग 11 वर्ष तक इसका राजस्थान सोशियोलॉजिकल एसोसिएशन के जर्नल का संपादन कार्य किया और इस दौरान आप गुरुजनों ने मुझे जो कुछ भी सिखाया उसका मैं शब्दों में वर्णन नहीं कर सकती। इतना कुछ मुझे सीखने को मिला और न केवल जर्नल से संबंधित अपितु सब्जेक्ट से संबंधित कोई भी समस्या जब भी मेरे सामने आई, आप लोगों ने उसका समाधान किया और अनवरत मार्गदर्शन किया। मैं अपने आप को सौभाग्यशाली समझती हूँ कि मेरे गुरुजनों का वरद हस्त हमेशा मेरे साथ रहा। मेरे पति मधुसूदन त्रिवेदी, मेरे परिवार के अन्य सदस्य, मेरे मीराकल कन्या महाविद्यालय का समाजशास्त्र विभाग के सभी सदस्य जिनके साथ मैंने काम किया, मेरे घनिष्ठ मित्रजन और मेरे पीएचडी स्टूडेंट्स, इन सबका योगदान मैं भुला नहीं सकती। सभी का आभार। और सबसे महत्वपूर्ण बात यह कि आरएसए के 2 पूर्व अध्यक्ष और मेरे गुरुजन इस कोरोना के समय में भी मुझे आशीर्वाद देने के लिए मेरे साथ खड़े हैं। मैं ओवरवेल्म्ड हूँ, उनके लिए कोई मेरे पास शब्द नहीं है। उनके आशीर्वाद और उनके स्नेह के लिए मेरे पास कोई शब्द नहीं है। प्रोफेसर नरेश भार्गव को हम जरूर मिस कर रहे हैं। यदि वो उदयपुर में होते तो वो भी अभी हमारे साथ में होते। वे बेंगलुरु में होने के कारण वो सुन रहे होंगे कि हम उनको बहुत याद कर रहे हैं और उनकी अनुपस्थिति हमें खल रही है। एक बार पुनः मैं आरएसए का धन्यवाद करती हूँ। नमस्कार।
Congratulations, Dr. Trivedi, for the honor. We move on to the next part of the program. Today, it's a proud moment for all of us that despite the crisis of COVID, RSA could keep pace with the changing times and go ahead with organizing this conference of such a level and with such limited resources at its disposal. For all this, I would like to congratulate and applaud the efforts of its charming, sincere, motivated, and committed secretary, Shri T.N. Dubey. His soft and low-profile personality helps in bringing people together and helps them in working together in a comfortable and amicable way. I invite you, sir, to present the Secretary's report.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Esteemed Chief Guest, Professor Sari Hanafi, President, International Sociological Association, my ever-inspiring and humbling, most respected teacher, Professor Avijit Pathak, sir, the fourth IP Modi Oration speaker of this function, President RSA, Professor S.C. Rajora, Lifetime Achievement Awardees, Professor S.P. Gupta ji and Dr. Mridula Trivedi ji, Coordinator of this session, Dr. Gunjit Kaur ma'am, all chairpersons and co-chairs of different sessions, all delegates, participants, and RSM members. Greetings and welcome. RSM is truly privileged to have you all here. The period of pandemic presented before us many hurdles and challenges, and we are still coping with it. It hampered our schedule, way of thinking and living, and the way we worked. We stumbled, panicked, felt handicapped and isolated. It stifled us, and it stifled RSA too. But life still goes on. We gathered ourselves, and with help of family, friends, technologies, and human will to overcome, some way or the other, we all found out ways to read, to teach, to converse, to meet, to express and communicate, and of course, to get a workaround about life in the given situation. Though travel and meetings were restricted due to the pandemic, we were able to hold record number of office bearers and EC meetings during the period. I personally feel enthused with the support of the executive committee members and all RSM members, and hope to continue getting same favor in future. In the given situation of COVID-19, RSA has had its own share of problems, but we managed many moments of joy and accomplishments. First of all, the Journal of RSA Rajasthan Journal of Sociology, which was facing financial crunch due to discontinued grant from ICSSR, got a fillip through assurance from IP Modi Endowment Fund for partial bearing of the publication expenses. And later on, with the restoration of grants from ICSSR in March 2020, we hope this patronage to continue in the years to come, both from IP Modi Endowment and ICSSR, and therefore RSA will not have to deplete its value, but meager membership fee proceeds to bring out the journal on its schedule. The journey of Rajasthan Journal of Sociology has been remarkable so far. It has maintained the standard, earned reputation, and has been coming out unhindered in spite of many challenges. Professor A.K. Bhargav, his entire editorial team, editorial advisors and reviewers have been key to this success. One thing which had remained a matter of concern for a long time was the empanelment of journal in UGC care list, as somehow we had technically missed the bus in the beginning. When this regime of empanelment started, RSA, editors, and all the members always felt that journal deserves this recognition. We took up this challenge this time. Many colleagues, university and college departments recommended our journal in June 2020 as per prescribed protocol to UGC care for its inclusion. It was for the wishes, efforts, and recommendations of esteemed colleagues and members of RSA like Professor Sanjay Lodha, Dr. Shilaja Nagendra, Dr. Avni Sharma, Dr. Sunita Sharma, Dr. Sudishna Parija, Professor Manish Thakur from IIM Calcutta, Professor B.N. Prasad, Professor Manish Verma from Lucknow, Mrs. Supriya Seth, that Rajasthan Journal of Sociology got a coveted entry in the UGC Care list of journals in October 2020. This much awaited recognition puts on us increased responsibility of maintaining the quality and withstand the predatory onslaught on academic scholarship. And I'm sure RJS will successfully take up this challenge too. You would be happy to know that the live membership of RSA has grown to 598 since 2018. We have been regularly updating updating and e-publishing our membership directory. The latest one in the series was e-published in January 2021. Many members have been requesting and inquiring about RSA membership certificates for their academic purposes. RSA therefore made arrangements to provide e-certificates to all its members who wanted it. All the requests received through an online requisitions were delivered, and facility will remain in force in future too. All the members have been concerned about the growth of sociology as a discipline in the state of Rajasthan. Its spread at secondary education level has been limited, and due to some recent government orders, the teaching posts in some schools were also reduced. We also feel that at college and university level too, sociology is not as much as prevalent as it should be as compared to other social sciences disciplines. This concern led us to reach out to many authorities. A good number of members, on request of RSA, became part of this campaign and wrote letters to Honorable Chief Minister and the Education Minister against curtailment of seats in sociology and voiced the need of spreading sociology widely at the school level. Some members mobilized sociological fraternity at local level too, made representations with local MLAs and MPs to impress upon them to open sociology in newly opened colleges in their area. We need to continue this effort slowly but surely. I'm sure it will bear results. In the series of this campaign, we also reached out to newly established tribal university Banswara in October 2020 to start the teaching of sociology at postgraduate level. And we are very happy to share that with the efforts of Professor Mohan Advani, our past president, and Dr. Paresh Dwivedi, Executive Committee, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the university gave approval to postgraduate program in sociology in December 2020. We are thankful to the Honorable Vice Chancellor for acceding to our request and hope that the same kind of efforts are taken up in other departments and subjects too. The e-newsletter of RSA, apart from showcasing RSA annual activities, has always tried to be truly representational of all sociological activities happening in the state. In the same vein, the exhaustive latest issue, diligently edited by Dr. Parul Singh in an elegant flipbook form, did reach to you, and we hope to continue the process of communication and dialogue with our members ever stronger and unhindered. As circumstances could not permit us to hold the conference physically, we had to adopt online mode, and therefore RSAEC collectively decided to conduct this conference on its own with the help and active support of all RSA members. I'm really privileged to welcome you all in this 27th Annual Conference 2020 on Education and Society, Equity, Justice and Inclusion. All RSA EC members and office bearers hope that we will have useful deliberations through various panel discussions and technical sessions. With some of these highlights of RSA activities, as the report of the Secretary, I, on behalf of RSAEC, once again welcome you all in this 4-day-long annual academic meet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shri Dubeji, for the report presentation. As per the program, Professor Paramjit Singh Judge, President ISS, was to be part of this session. I think because of some unavoidable circumstances, he couldn't be with us today. So now we can move on to the open session wherein participants, they can satisfy their queries from the esteemed guests. So they can just raise hands and ask the questions and unmute their mics. Yes, Pragna, you can start.
Thank you so much. First of all, congratulations to the entire team of GC Kota. I remember a few years back when GC Kota had an offline conference and all of us virtual, and I miss all those moments. Saying that, in the Q&A box. So I would not like to repeat it. Those questions were for Pathak sir. And with the in regards to Peru, I want to put a question that Peru has seen a very specific involvement of religion in terms of what I can say, solidarity with all the people-centric struggle. And I believe that the education has played a very key role in that. I would like Professor to enlighten us with that experience. Thank you. Regarding to Pathak sir, yes. Pathak sir, this question is very important because as a teacher, I have learned a lot seeing you, where I always saw you in front of all our student struggles or any struggle in the university or for that matter outside. So what is the role of a teacher? I would really like you to elaborate more on that as an educationist. Thank you, sir.
Should I respond first?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great to hear from you, Pragya. Thank you for listening to me and raising this important question. You know that just very briefly, because time is limited, as a teacher with some keen interest in education, I believe that, time and again, we have to refer to Paulo Freire. And when Paulo Freire spoke of dialogue and the dialogic education, and the dialogic education is important to question and interrogate what he would argue the banking form of education, where no conversation takes place and the teacher only through the monologue bombards the mind of the student with all sorts of information, theories, fact, and knowledges, which are essentially dead. What is important is that dialogue and the conversation and regaining our voices, restoring our voices. And we can regain our language and regain our voice only when we converse and we sharpen the following faculties, I believe, which are very important faculties for studentship, for teaching. The first important faculty is the art of listening. And imagine today, any kind of a totalitarian regime is absolutely opposed to the art of listening because it is centered primarily on the monologue. And the second important quality which in the classroom as teacher we should try to cultivate is that creating a mind, the spirit of being a wanderer. We learn, unlearn, and continually explore, evolve, and develop. In other words, keen interest in even the viewpoints of the so-called opponents. But see the time today that dissent has been criminalized. That anyone who raises a critical voice that questions the status quo is immediately castigated, seen as anti-national, or seen as the enemies of the nation. As a result, we are losing the art of living with the plurality of perspectives and the worldview. So art of listening, art of negotiation, art of conversation. And I tend to believe that democracy would die if our classrooms become monologic, if our classroom becomes merely, and if we become merely a mediator with the official curriculum, between the official curriculum and the students. Classroom has to be democratic, dialogic, alive, and the teacher and the student as collective subjects ought to work together, and through a constant process of learning and unlearning, explore the world together. And this is where I think that the three things that immediately come to my mind. One is, for instance, the 11th thesis on Feuerbach that Marx wrote, when he says that one of the idle philosophizing, mere intellectualism, and there is a problem with that. Philosophers have interpreted the world in many ways. The point, however, is to alter it, to transform it and change it. In other words, unity of theory and praxis. Possibly, Antonio Gramsci, in his elaboration of organic intellectuals, took this 11th thesis pretty seriously, because organic intellectuals are not merely orators, not merely intellectuals. Organic intellectuals are deeply connected with the living reality. And that's why Gramsci would argue the intellectual element merely thinks and the popular element feels. But it is important for the organic intellectual to build that bridge, and which in another context, when Gandhi would talk about that we learn not merely through the head, not merely through the abstracted intellect, we learn through practice. We learn through experimentation with the self, with politics, with the world. And that, I believe, is absolutely important. And these are some of the things which I feel Paulo Freire, Marxian 11th thesis on Feuerbach, Gramscian notion of organic intellectuals, and Gandhian notion of the integration between the theory and the practice. These are some of the ideas that often come to me personally as a teacher, and which I believe is absolutely important to transform our classroom into a dialogic process of constant exploration and discovery and the rediscovery and learning and unlearning. It is not just completing the syllabus. It is not just about grading the students. It is about evolving together, learning together, unlearning together, questioning, creating, imagining together. So that is the way I feel. Much later, when you and I meet, we will talk with much more elaboration. Take care, stay safe, Progya.
Thank you. It was always inspiring, sir, to listen to you. Thank you so much.
I think Pragya had one question to Professor Sari also. I think if you can respond.
Yeah. Can I hear it again? The question.
Yes, Pragya, can you just
certainly, sir.
Briefly.
With my limited understanding and reading on Peru, Peru's religion had a very different kind of orientation, where we could see that the religious people or the gurus or the priests, they participated in people-centric movement. They took the leadership. So, and education also had a very important role when it came to challenging the dictatorial regimes of Pinochet. So, I would like you to elaborate on these two aspects as what it was in the religious movement that inspired these priests to join the movements, and what is it in the education system of Peru that the challenging the dictatorial ship came much earlier than India. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for your questions. I mean, let me qualify what I said. What I try to say historically, social sciences and specifically sociology look negatively to the religion. I mean, focusing on violence, subjugation, etc., anti-rationality, and somehow this is true, but the religion generate other things. Religion also generate love, solidarity, resistance against colonialism, against imperialism, and so on. So I think today, with the withdrawal of the state from its mission as a service provider for health, education, social services, etc., what take over in many places, including my region, in the Arab region, is the religious institutions, and they are doing really a lot of work, community work, that is extremely important. And they are, if you look to the Arab Spring, you find Islamic movements are in a vanguard of resisting against the authoritarian regimes. So I think there is a historical, if you like, dichotomy we often did between the secular and the religious, between the left and the religious movement, that in some area has meaning, in other areas doesn't. And I think today, the very fact that some of elites in my region who spouses the French secularism and wanted to project, applicated or imitated in our region is disastrous. It's really generating so much division and social division and conflict. So what I'm arguing, we need to rethink the presence of religions in the public spheres, allowing it to be there, but through non-authoritarian practical reasoning. I think the work of the Irish philosopher Maeve Coke is very important to say, opposing to Rawls and others and Habermas about their reluctance to accept religious argumentation in public spheres, to say no, all arguments should be in the public spheres, but under the rule that they are not authoritarians. So here where I would qualify religious movement, if it is non-authoritarian, it become ideology like other ideologies, and why not? If it is authoritarian, here where become we need to struggle against it. So simply what I'm saying, that this thinking that our sociology, our rationality is the antithesis of the transcendental, of the religious, I mean, is at least, I would say, is not helpful. As simple as that, and generating conflict instead of resolving conflict.
Thank you, sir. I just want to qualify my question also. I said Pinochet in Peru, it was Chile. Sorry.
Yeah. I know. I know. I actually, in Latin America, it's very important. I mean, not only the theology of liberation, which was extremely instrumental in struggling against the the junta, the military junta, but I think struggling against the politics of neoliberalism. Again, for me, as you are interested in Latin America, for me, the best the best example I can bring is the Pentecostal movement, or the Pentecostal church, where is collectively this church in Brazil voted in favor of Lula, and how they are collectively voted later on in favor of Bolsonaro. So again, this is to show you that how important the religious movement and can be a democratic force or can be a very authoritarian force. And this is where we need to work with them, if you like. Here, where my sociology is a sociology of dialogue, that we need to talk with these people to see why shift have been from Lula to Bolsonaro, okay, and things like that.
Thank you, sir. So there is a question. This question is directed to Professor Pathak. This is from Mrs. Sunita Chawda. Sir, she is asking how we make our class more creative and innovative. I think we're the best to answer this question. We all have experienced it in your class, and I think it will be very fortunate to hear this from you for the audience of RSA. So please share your thoughts, sir.
No, I think it's an interesting question, but this is a question that cannot be answered in a way. Dale Carnegie writes book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because the very act of living, there is an inherent element of uncertainty and unpredictability. And about the act of living with the uncertainty, that there are limits to planning and design. And I think that the coronavirus has taught us this lesson, that in this 9 to 10 months, that there is an inherent uncertainty of existence. And I believe that our classroom becomes beautiful only when that we reduce the degree of planning. We need certain kind of a preparation framework, but every day, every hour, every moment, it is a new reality with its own surprises, with its own uniqueness. So it was like saying that if you teach Durkheim's elementary forms of religious in 1990, and again in 2021 you teach, you do not teach in the same way. You have changed. The world has changed. Experiences have changed. You just cannot come to the classroom with the notes that you prepared in 1990. Unfortunately, many of our classrooms, our learning process, our process of delivering lecture and the thinking, even the questions that we raise in our exams are plagiarized questions. And the answer is the plagiarized answer. So the answer to plagiarism is not computed. Answer to plagiarism is the every moment being alive, innovative, and to accept the inherent unpredictability and uncertainty of the moment. So it was like, as I often ask myself, that last year when on January 5, outside goons entered the university campus and beat up students and teachers. And if after a week I come to the theory class and I teach Althusser's repressive state apparatus and the ideological state apparatus, can I teach Althusser in the same way which I taught before the attack? Or for example, now it already has acquired yet another meaning. So I would suggest that to be alive to the changing reality, to accept certain amount of uncertainty and unpredictability and the aliveness. And that I believe is very important. It should not be frozen, dead, plagiarized. And I'll just end with an illustration. Once in a theory class, we would talk about Madness and Civilization and Discipline and Punish, Foucault's book. And then one day, just I came to the classroom and just requested a group of students to come near the podium and to just laugh. Laugh at the very absurdity of the existence. Laugh without any reason. And don't laugh at another, but laugh at oneself. And it was very difficult for the people to laugh. They could not laugh. They could not laugh. They were very hesitant. And then I just started laughing in the classroom. And then the students also began to laugh. And then that entire day, the discussion followed. See that what this education system has done to us. Our bodies have become so regimented, so tight. Right from the nursery classes, it's like that the teacher comes to the classroom, almost like a signal, like the army general he emits. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And the tight body, And isn't it through these technologies of discipline and surveillance, the bodies have become docile bodies, regimented bodies. And that's why just we cannot laugh in the classroom, Just a teacher is asking, come, laugh without any reason, and they cannot laugh. And the class begins with that interrogation, with that question, that why we cannot laugh anymore, laugh without any reason. Can our body become light, musical, rhythmic, that with the teacher and the student for no reason are laughing? And only when we do that, then possibly it makes much sense to make sense of what this man was talking about, the regimentation, discipline, the docile body, tight body. Body is only emitting signal to the gestures. The body has lost its rhythm, lost its unpredictability, and it has become merely a tight, regimented body. So I think that seeing it a thing that every day we evolve and grow, that is what I believe is that possibly one of the things that makes our classroom much more alive and vibrant and creative. Thank you for raising this question.
I have asked another question. I would like Professor Pathak to share his comments on new education policy and online teaching. I'm sure his classrooms have not been the same. I don't know how his experience has been on online teaching in JNU, because our JNU classrooms were tiny and most dialogic. So I would really like to get his comments on these two things.
Now, one thing I think that to begin with, one of the things that I wish to reflect on, and most of the people, including most of my colleagues, do not agree with me on that. And that is what, when this irresistible virus came and haunted our consciousness and imagination. And imagine those days from April, May, June, July, death lost its meaning. Death became a number, a statistics. And then also the taken for granted world, that completely collapsed and crumbled. And under those circumstances, we were all living with extreme existential and psychic uncertainty, the fear of death and the anxiety. And also, for example, that completely, the link between the inner and the outer completely crumbled and the collapsed. We were psychologically crippled, confined, insulated, living with acute psychic anxiety, loneliness, apart from the another kind of hierarchy that was emerging during the time of the pandemic. Gated communities very soon closed their doors for that entire brigade of maids, domestic help, and the servants. We saw the work of the migrant workers, the social hierarchy, inequality, new kind of surveillance manifested itself, economic loss, joblessness, we all saw it. But what we did as educationists and teachers, it was such a huge crisis of humankind. We as teachers and educationists didn't respond to it adequately. We did only one thing. We thought that everything as usual is normal. Only one thing we have to do. We have to transform education into a software endeavor. Zoom and Google Meet became the avatar. Otherwise, everything would be the same. Same monologue, same teaching, same classroom, same assignment, same lecture, same attendance. And it was like, that suddenly you get a mail from your student that my aunt has been diagnosed with COVID. My grandmother has died in a hospital. Next morning, what do I do? Should I continue to give a lecture on Pierre Bourdieu's theory of capital and habitus in a style, in a heavily mystified language? Or do I now engage in a conversation with the meaning of suffering, pain, and living and death at the time of the pandemic? Pierre Bourdieu can wait for a month. Talcott persons can wait for a month. But we are passing through unprecedented crisis. And if, as teachers and educationists, we do not reflect on that, respond to that, and we only think that only thing that has to be changed is that from direct physical face-to-face interaction come online, otherwise everything would remain the same. That expresses the utter poverty of imagination, the poverty of pedagogic imagination. How many suicide, So I believe that Bob Dylan has to write yet another song. How many suicide do you have to see in order to see this entire discontent relating to online education and the teaching? From that Kerala girl, it began. Aishwarya Reddy from LSR, it happened. How many suicide do you want to see? Now, I think that is where I believe that we need to reflect on that how we do it. Yes, online at this time, it has its role, but what we teach, what we engage with, how we interact with it, can we keep on bombarding the student with a number of assignments, that age-old assignments? Can I ask my student who lives in a village in Bihar and who is seeing now that the migrant workers from Surat have come to the village in search of a home, that they would go back to their village, but when they entered the village, the villagers are not allowing them to come inside. They stay somewhere else because they came with the virus, it is suspected. Now, when my student is seeing that, do I ask my student to write a term paper on Rampura village that M.N. Srinivas talked about? M.N. Srinivas didn't witness coronavirus. M.N. Srinivas didn't see migrant workers. M.N. Srinivas didn't see the changing landscape of the villages when these migrant workers are coming. Or do I initiate a conversation with that student and ask him or her to reflect on our village at the time of the pandemic and when the migrant workers come there? What happens? Then his or her social anthropology study would acquire a new meaning, instead of the age-old plagiarized assignment, write on M.N. Srinivas's Rampura or write on Andhra Sanchur village. So it is sad, it is pathetic, the way, as educationists, often being guided, because our colleges and universities are being run by techno managers. They are not pedagogues, they are techno managers. So for them, a teacher is a CV, a student is merely the number of grade or the number of attendance seat. We become so insensitive, so dull. And I think that as teachers, we ought to reflect on that with heightened self-critique. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As always, giving lots of insights and for us to reflect on our time. Thank you.
Other voices also, any other query from any of the participants? Okay, Gunjit ma'am, you can go ahead now.
Thanks to our esteemed speakers for enlightening us on so many issues that affect us in our daily life as members of society as well as teachers. You, in this particular session, you realized what you professed, established dialogue as the route to knowledge and to dispel any doubts. Think beyond, unshackle the classrooms, ignite and not restrict imagination, your own or your students. Interact with your environment and enjoy the beauty of theory. Thanks for opening up our vistas. We'll go back enriched with all the knowledge that we have accumulated in this inaugural session. Now I invite Dr. Ashutosh Vyas, Vice President, RSA, to present the vote of thanks.
You.
Yes. आप अपना वीडियो भी ऑन कर लीजिए व्यास जी, आशुतोष सर. We can't hear you, sir. Unmute yourself. Yes. Unmute, please. No.
अब आ रही?
हाँ, आप अनम्यूट होकर के फिर म्यूट हो जाते हैं. नो. Still muted, sir. Yes. Yes. I think we're still muted, sir. Okay. I think there is some issue.
सर अब आ रही क्या?
हाँ जी, आ रही है.
Good afternoon, all of you. On the behalf of Rajasthan Sociological Association. Continue, sir. Continue करें क्या?
हाँ, प्लीज प्लीज. बीच में आप फिर से अनम्यूट हो गए सर. You are again muted. No. सर आप अनम्यूट होते हैं और फिर म्यूट हो जाते हैं इमीडिएटली. देयर इज सम प्रॉब्लम. अभी बीच में थोड़ी सी आवाज आई थी आपकी. कैन आई? यस. यस सर. फिर से अगेन म्यूटेड. सर देयर इज सम प्रॉब्लम. Can I request Professor Rajora, President RSA, to do this honor, please?
Okay.
There's some problem with Ashutosh Vyas, sir.
Doesn't matter. on behalf of Ashutosh Vyas and on behalf of whole office bearers and executive and on behalf of each and every RSA member, those who are present here, I extend wholehearted
We lost your connection. You are not audible, sir.
Okay. Now, is it okay?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
Because there was fluctuation in the electricity.
Okay.
It was not there. Because of that, interruption was there. So again, on behalf of Rajasthan Sociological Association, I extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Sari Hanafi. He has been with us for such a long time since morning. I do not know what is the timings there where he is, but he was very kind enough to accept our this invitation and shared with us. He is president of International Sociological Association. Therefore, it is a matter of pride for all of us to be with Professor Sari Hanafi. As I said that it is from regional to global, local to global, regional to universal. That way, this inaugural session was very, very fruitful, very, very significant from that point of view. So I thank you, Professor Hanafi, for your kind presence. I thank you so much, Professor Avijit Pathak. When I was at JNE 1994, I was doing a refresher course. Sir, I listened to you for 1.5 hours only, but I was very much impressed. Since then, I was looking for you that when there will be time to again listen you and to be benefited from you. Today, there are no words for me to express for you, sir, because your every word, every term, every sentence is live and appealing for each and everyone. Very practical. Whatever you say, that is not only theory, that is not only that abstract, that is practical, that is empirical, sir. So you have given a very intellectual, very significant speech, and you have benefited all of us. Your presence in our inaugural session was very, very significant, very much important, and I express my sense of gratitude for you, sir, for sparing time for Rajasthan Sociological Association. And I believe that in future also, you will be with us for your guidance and for our that betterment. So thank you so much, Professor Pathak, sir. I thank you all the office bearers, all the executive members, all the participants, my secretary and convener of this conference, T.N. Dubey, because Dr. Gunjit Kaur has already said that Dr. Dubey, he is a hard worker, he is very sensible person. Until and unless he doesn't take himself, until and unless he doesn't involve in the work, he never satisfies. That way, his cooperation, his involvement is very, very, that what should I say? I do not have words, significant only. And I thank Dr. Gunjit Kaur for her coordination, for convening this program very amicably. And because you are all our members of this RSA, therefore, the sense of gratitude is for all of one, each of us. I have welcomed you all. Again, I thank you all and myself involved in all these matters. So I thank you, Gunjit Madam, for convening this session. And I thank again one and all those who were with us on this virtual mode. I again congratulate our life members, that Lifetime Achievement awardees, Professor S.P. Gupta and Dr. Mridula Trivedi. And along with them, my teachers too were present there.
We again lost it, sir.
Professor C.L. Sharma was there, Professor Mohan Ramani was there, and I believe that please again join us at 4 o'clock.
लास्ट की गल नहीं
Could you listen, please?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So because I'm at a small place and the electricity supply disrupts every time. In spite of all those, I didn't stood up from my chair since I sat at 11 o'clock. And I think all of you continued to join us, and I hope that you will again join at 4 o'clock in our next session. So for this session, I extend my heartily thanks to all and one. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for your warm and kind words of gratitude for one and all. This is what makes you so special as president of RSA. And I think that is one reason how RSA could move ahead in these difficult times. It's because of your able leadership. So with this, we conclude this inaugural session. Thank you to one and all, to our esteemed speakers, to our participants, and see you all at 4 for the technical session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Rian.